Hello, friends. Welcome back to the next episode of the After Hours Lounge. Quite pleased with this episode because it was recommended to me by one of my listeners, which for me as a podcast host is always quite nice because it's kind of affirming that people are actually listening to me chatting shit with people. So yeah, thank you to Carlin from, I think she lives in Aberdeen, but she sent me a message about this guy and he's been up to all sorts of stuff, getting in the sea with his camera at silly times in the morning when it's absolutely freezing. All in the name of kind of encouraging people to go in the sea. As you will know, I'm a very much advocate for the sea and how it helps my mental health. So yeah, without further ado, Mr. Mike Guest, thank you very much for coming to join me.
Thanks very much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be able to talk about these things.
Yeah, and it's nice to have a fellow Scotsman on. Nice to hear an accent as well. I do miss it. I'm down. I said to you before we hit record, my accent has gone quite a lot, but there is something nice talking to another Scotsman.
There we go. Yeah, no, I mean, chatting about where you were brought up, and it's a gorgeous part of the world, and we've got a lot going on in Scotland. We've got a lot of space. We've got a lot of wilderness. We've got a lot of coastline, as does the whole of the UK. But yeah, I love this place. I have spent a large chunk of my life traveling for work. In fact, 21 years of being self-employed.
Yeah,
hit 40 this year, and I have always been on the move for work. But over the last 10 years, more and more, I find myself just spending more and more time in Scotland and trying to engineer my life to be based more here.
Yeah, I think I kind of feel like Scotland, especially like the Highlands and further up in Scotland, is very much up and coming as well, isn't it? Like, and this is pre-COVID, but COVID will accelerate it if anything. But there's a lot of people wanting to move up there, isn't there? You know, kind of better quality of life, as you said, more space, less people. There's so many kind of outdoor activities you can do. You know, like the I did some work for a kayaking company, and they were always going up there. You know, there's all the I've got friends who are super into climbing. Like there's a lot going on up there that I think people are starting to cotton on to now.
Yeah, it's there. We've got it all. You know, we really do. You know, we've got the midges in summer in the West Coast, which is not ideal for people. I think a lot of people that move up maybe get surprised with that. And if you can deal up in the Northwest, if you can deal with those really late mornings, and also 4:30 it's dark, so it has its balance. But I think that's what gives it the beauty. You know, the brutal weather days make those better days even better, and it doesn't rain as much as people say it does up here. That's just one of those things that people love to say. But I spend a lot of time in the water, so I'm not really bothered about rain or water.
Yeah, you don't notice it as much. And then like my mum has lived up there for years now. I grew up there, but she always says that as well. She always says, you kind of you get what you get in the winter, but it pays back in the summer when it doesn't get dark till midnight and it's light again at 3:30 in the morning.
Oh, it's amazing. You know, you can literally be getting in the water for a surf or to go shoot at 3:30.
Yeah,
And I swear I've probably got out at maybe 11 o'clock some nights,
yeah,
it's kind of ridiculous. You're exhausted.
yeah. That's crazy. That's crazy. So tell myself and the readers a little bit. You say you been freelance for 21 years. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do and what you get up to.
So a little brief explanation of what happened with me was I left school with maybe one exam to my name. My parents said, right, if you're leaving early, you need to get a job as soon as you walk out the door. So I ended up chefing for a few years. And after that, I found myself working in events. So I spent probably 12 to 14 years working in events, doing lighting, rigging, power distribution, you name it, music, rock and roll stuff,
Yeah,
weddings, the whole gambit.
Yeah.
And then I guess about 7 years ago, I fell into photography. I was totally burnt out from the event world. It wasn't really doing it for me. And my sister kind of threw me a carrot and said, hey, come and live with me in New Zealand. There's a room for you. I'll get you a job waxing skis at this place, Racer's Edge, with Schaefer and Diana got me a job. And I waxed skis at night and a ski tour during the day, and kind of made this shift into photography with one of my sister's best friends, Roscoe, and he's become one of my best mates. We started together filming and photographing at the same time, and we still contact each other. We're still in touch, on a weekly basis. And this was this whole kind of shift of like, right, I'm over this world, which I can get loads of work in. I'm just taking the same light out of the same box and putting it up. It's a brilliant industry with loads of amazing people that I met over the years, but I was just over it.
Yeah.
And then I've been on a 7-year self-taught journey of photography and film ultimately now. And yeah, hit 40 in lockdown and couldn't quite believe it, really. It was like, wow, here we go. Made it to 40.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, because it's funny. Like I completely changed careers last year as well, and it's something I've kind of been grappling with for the last year. And I changed actually kind of because of my declining mental health. And it is funny how I spent the best part of 10 years in industry, and I mean I was in the windsurfing industry. It was lovely. I was traveling the world teaching windsurfing, all this stuff, but you do just get to a point where you're like, this is great, but it's not for me anymore. And I think a lot of people fight against that and stay in the job because whether it's job security or they're like, well, no, this is what I do, I've got to keep doing it. But I think a lot of people don't necessarily take that leap of faith, do they, like you did?
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, I often wonder, especially within sports or many things, that there can be a loss of identity.
Yeah.
And I think that can be really tricky to grapple with. And depending on your age, whether you're mentally able to understand that. And I think for me, I just felt like I was on this kind of treadmill with it. And I didn't become a lighting designer and I didn't become X, Y, and Z. None of these things like seemed like the right thing, but I don't regret the years I spent doing that because I learned so much stuff, and it worked perfectly for my sort of problem solving dyslexic brain to learn that. And now when it comes to doing shoots or being on productions, yeah, I'm a photographer, a filmer, but I've got all this knowledge that I'm always willing to help and give if it's needed, and just to help out. I love that kind of side of it.
I suppose it is slightly relative as well, lighting, all that sort of stuff. Like, whether you're doing photo shoots or that, it's not completely unrelated. But like you said, it kind of whatever you're doing, you do get these kind of life skills. And that sounds like a, standard phrase to say, but I can't think of anything better to call them. But you do get these skills that it doesn't matter what you go into. Like you said, you'll have taken skills from your first few years being a chef that you won't necessarily, other than just being able to cook food, but you'll be able to take those skills and kind of apply them to whatever. And I think a lot of people have them and they don't realize.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny they keep popping up. Those transferable skills. You kind of have a think, and people go, "Oh, wow, how do you know that?" And you're like, "Well, I spent 12 years putting up lights, pushing buttons, dragging cables around festivals. We used to do some of the first stuff we did was weddings, and it'd be like a Wednesday through to a Sunday because you'd go and set up in a marquee and do the generators and the light and the PA, and it was like this Groundhog Day. But the guys that I worked with were great fellas, good guys and girls. So that was a lot of what made the monotony possible. Yeah, it was good.
Nice. So you ended up in New Zealand, and then you kind of came back to Scotland, and then you said you turned the big 4-0 in lockdown. Now, one of the reasons I got you on was because you started this project called Dawn Days. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Why you started it?
Yeah, Dawn Days was born from a conversation with a fellow photographer, Cornish fella called Nick Pumphrey. I've known Nick kind of through a bunch of surfers, and then I met him when I was on tour for the last couple of years. For the last couple of years, I've been working with Patagonia Europe on their worn wear program. So it's a program where we go around and we fix wetsuits, Gore-Tex jackets, and kind of educate people. So it's this big rolling process. So I was doing photography on that, met Nick, and we kept in contact, as all photographers do, talking about projects, ideas, let's do this. And then we were on this phone call, and it was about a month after lockdown had hit. I had been out on tour, and we got a phone call from HQ, and then 74 hours later, I found myself standing outside my flat back in Scotland.
Yeah.
I was originally in Austria. We'd had to drive all the way across Europe, drop vehicles, drive home. I'd had to get my van, go to Amsterdam, get the boat, drive home.
Yeah.
And, my world just span out of control. You know, someone put this massive stop button, like you're done, boom, stop.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know how to deal with things. I couldn't cope with it. And when I was on this phone call with Nick, he was like, oh, look, I'm going to swim out at the blue hour and shoot till sunrise every day. I'm going to pick a few photos and I'm maybe going to post them up, but I'm just missing being in the water. And it clicked with me. I was like, wow, I live like 5 minutes from the beach. I could just walk down from my house in Portobello. So I live in Portobello in Edinburgh.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's literally a left, a right, a left, walk straight. I'm at the beach.
Yeah.
And it started off basically just for something to do, for something creative to do, to master my water housing, but just have the routine. I had no routine. I needed a routine.
Yeah.
And at the end of the phone call, I realized with Nick, and I was like, oh man, you get to get up an hour later than me.
Oh,
So
yeah.
he's getting up at like 5:30. I'm getting up at 4:30. And progressively through the month, it got to the point where I got up at 2:45 was the earliest time I got up to go out.
Jeez.
Which was wearing.
Yeah, I bet. But like you said, even though the time's changing, like you just hit the nail on the head there. And I think that's what a lot of people kind of didn't have, and that's a routine, having a routine and a bit of a purpose. And by, especially like you said, if you, and I've got a lot of friends that kind of are in sort of similar positions where they were away doing work or based on, events or, that kind of thing. And suddenly they find yourself back in your house sitting there like, right, well, what do I do then? And like you said, actually, if you have a reason to get out the door, that's so much more beneficial for people's mental health than I think we all took for granted before this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the start of it really was just this thing. And on the first day, I was just going to go and take photos.
Yeah.
Started taking some stills, and then I'm like, wait a minute. I mean, the camera I have is just unbelievable at video. And I took a couple nugs and thought, oh, that's kind of cool. Put a little bit of sound effects under it, picked a tune from one of my pals, and just put that along the side. And thought, right, yeah, maybe I will post this on Instagram. I've got a love-hate relationship with social media, but I thought, well, this is kind of cool. And I guess maybe some people can't get to the beach, so maybe they'll like this.
Yeah.
And I just thought about making these. It was that first day of making these little mellow, moody vibes for people to just kind of zone out on and stop maybe incessantly scrolling and just go, have a breath, take a minute, take a moment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's, well, I mean, I said, I always do my due diligence on whoever I've got on the podcast. I do my research and all that stuff. And I did end up a couple of days ago going down a bit of a deep dive on your Vimeo channel. And like you said, there was one, I can't remember what the date was, but there was one where you'd done almost like I don't know, I'm not a photography guy, but like a speed blur of like the lights as the sun was coming up or something like that. And I started watching that. And like you said, you got the music on and stuff, and you do, it maybe sounds a bit lame, but you do kind of get transported out for a couple of minutes or, for even 30 seconds. And you're like, oh, that's pretty nice, isn't it?
And that's it, man. That was exactly what I would hope that some people might get. And if they don't, they don't. That's cool. People can take it for whatever they want. They can take it on any level. And I think as the project kind of grew legs, or became a project, it became this thing.
Yeah.
My pal Barry Jackson, sorry, lives just down the road from me, literally about 500 meters.
Yeah.
He's a sound engineer, but he's a great musician. He used to run a record label.
Oh, cool.
And he was waking up super early because he was doing a morning shift, like maybe 3 days a week at the BBC, mixing the news in Glasgow. And so he'd wake up and he'd walk out this back of his house and he'd put his recorder on and it was dead silent. And all you could hear was birdsong.
Yeah.
So he'd start recording birdsong and then he'd walk down to the beach and record the lapping waves. And then it was like, oh, you're doing this. You're doing this. And then he started reacting off my videos and making me music. So he would make me music, and sometimes I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and there would be this tune from Barry. He'd be like, check what I made you. Yeah. And I'd have my cup of tea, get my wetsuit half on, lie on the floor and just listen to the music. And then, right, cool. That's the vibe for today. And it wouldn't always be like that, but a lot of the time the music drove what I created. and I'd walk down the beach and go and film. I didn't decide where I was going to go on that beach anytime. I would maybe just decide what lens I would take out, and then that would dictate what happened. And I just kind of I don't know, just went with it. It was like a response to what was going on and needing to have a routine, of which I have never had. I'm awful like that.
Yeah. That's weird that you say it, like, because you usually, like, I've made sort of edits of, windsurfing and things like that. And it's always been the kind of content, the footage first, and then the music. So it's interesting that the music kind of informed you first.
It often can be like that for me. And I think I've always done that. And now I know technically that might not be the right way.
I don't know what's the right way, but it's
Well,
just,
I think often what happens is people will create a film, there'll be a guide track, but then it will be scored for them. So I think, traditionally there's that way. I've never been one for sticking to rules, but I love music. I spent a lot of time within the music world, within the Scottish folk music world. My ex-partner was a Scottish folkie, and I started pushing boxes, I think, when I was 16, doing a bit of roadieing, actually, with a friend of mine, Scott, at the Liquid Rooms in Edinburgh. So I'd always been around music. And for me, that's the easiest way to edit. Like, pick the beat, edit to the beat, get the feeling. And then when you realize something's a bit short, start shifting around. But for me, that gets me going. It gets me going at the start. I'll do the start and the end and then the middle. But with these, it was just music, lay it down, and just sort of see what happened.
And did you kind of initially approach it as like, this is just a bit of fun, or were you really committed to being like, I want to make this really good? Like, was that what I mean? Is because you obviously, we're kind of back at home and out of a routine and all that, but finding this new one, were you kind of like, I'm going to completely throw myself in and put as much effort in as possible, or were you kind of like, oh, I'll just shoot some stuff, and if it's good, it's good?
I think on the first morning it was like, just going to go down and see how this goes. And I got such a buzz from it. And when I was editing and putting the stuff, not even about putting it up, I was just like, oh, that was awesome. Because I'd kind of fallen out of love with video. I'd had a few jobs, things just didn't feel right. So I'd really been pushing the stills thing. And I was like, oh, this is great. I was loving this. And to be honest, I just lost myself in it. I was aware of what was going on, definitely within the latter part of it. But really it was just, but it also became quite obsessive. Because I want to achieve this. I want to actually do something. I want to commit to something for once in my life and actually like go all the way through this. And then the buzz, and Barry got into it, and my friend Stu, wrote some meditation bits to go over it. And it was just like this productive wrecking ball that was Dawn Days with me and some of the boys. And that bit's kind of worth talking about, is that the relationship I now have with Barry, we've known each other for probably 20 years, working in events, but didn't really know each other. I'd never met Stu until last year at some point. And the connection that I've got with them and the conversations that we can have because of going through what we've gone through together, which is lockdown, but then is also being a part of something when I kind of couldn't see what was in front of me. There was nothing. As far as I could tell, you're like, it wasn't the end of the world, but there was no next job. There was no carrot dangling of a holiday or a shoot or going surfing. I'm here. This is all I've got. So I think I went all in, basically.
No, it's funny. Like, that's something like I've found that I particularly struggle with, is not having something to look forward to. And I've kind of realized that about myself. So I always aim to try and have something within the next, couple of months. But like you said, when this first happened and that first lockdown, we were completely going into the unknown, weren't we? And it's weird. It's weird you say that. Like I found myself, like I connected with a childhood friend again that, I started chatting to him while I was, I was up in Scotland, chatting to him again. And it is funny. I think that's one of the good things to come out of this year, is that kind of these, like you said, like, you've known this guy for 20 years. But people have reconnected, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Reconnecting to their pals, being a bit more aware about what's around them when there's not the hubbub and noise of cars. Then you start to appreciate where you are. Like where I've lived for 10 years, maybe more. or is it that long? And I found places I'd never walked before.
Yeah.
I saw the place in a different light because I wasn't just coming back from being on tour or being away and doing my X, Y, and Z, and then I'm off again.
Mm.
It's, you know, that the whole process was really interesting because, like you say, we're always wondering about what's in front of us, and generally, I'm stressing about what's happened in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you say this without it sounding corny or whatever, but that being in the moment, probably the biggest lesson of that was like, I'm here now, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Sitting in the water with a camera, looking at the sunrise, watching the same oyster catchers and this little seal that's popping up every few days. Like, wow, cool. I just need to be here. But I'm terrible at that. Always running off to the next thing, planning the next shoot, planning the next trip, worrying about what someone's thought.
Yeah.
And
Last one. Yeah.
I'm not totally fixed that. Like, you know, Dawn Days hasn't miraculously changed me
Mm.
completely, but it's allowed me to get more awareness, to understand what's going on in my head and how to deal with it. And what I should probably add to that as well is that I did seek some professional help.
Okay.
I'm really lucky that one of my best pals, Lewis, is a psychologist down in Devon. And I chat to him and I kind of spoke to him, said, maybe I need to chat to someone. He's like, yeah, great idea. And I was like,
Yeah.
but what do I do? Like, which bunch of letters, the ACT, the this, the BBC, the ABC, you know, what do
Yeah.
I do? And you have a think about what might be good for you. And I decided on ACT therapy with this lady, Helen from Compass Therapy. And I started just doing a weekly call with her just
Yeah.
to kind of understand what's going on. And for me, it sounded quite interesting. It was like a bit of Eastern philosophy of mindfulness and not like ultimate positivity, but just kind of being in the moment and taking responsibilities for your thoughts and learning not to fuse yourself to your feelings and thoughts. And so with the two of them, what I hadn't realized was I spoke to Helen after a couple of weeks and she was laughing when I showed her Dawn Days. She's like, this is hilarious. I was like, what? She said, you're doing exactly what we talked about.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I was like, oh, she's like, you found something. You're taking an action. You're committing to it.
Mm.
Like, oh, okay, great. I better carry on then.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice to be validated by someone like that, isn't it? Oh, I'm doing.
Yeah. So, and that was great. And then another lady, Jana Johnston, American lady who lives in India, just doing some other stuff with her, which is maybe a little more on the woo-woo side, as people might call it.
Right.
But having a daily morning practice of just breathing and movement to just calm down, stretch, and take a bit of time for myself as opposed to just jumping on the phone or the laptop.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that's, I mean, you know, you said it like as if it's something that only you struggle with, but I think it's the human race in general. Like we definitely struggle with not, especially in this day and age. I think we've probably got worse at it as the centuries have rolled on, but not being able to stay in the moment. Like I think that's one of the biggest, especially for me, like one of my biggest like faults I have is I overthink so many things. Like if I'm like worried about, you know, like in the last few months, obviously it's been my work. I'm freelance. I work in social media. So it's been a roller coaster as well. You know, one day a client's, no, right, we're stopping. And then a month later, oh, can we get you back? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm always overthinking like, oh, I should have, you know, maybe if I'd done this, it would have worked. And maybe, and that just consumes me. And like you said, I'm kind of looking forward to try and find new work or what can I do? But then also in the back of my head, I'm going, well, if I'd charged this client X amount more, or if I'd worked a bit harder for them, maybe I wouldn't have lost them, blah, blah, blah. That you kind of completely forget that you're having a nice time. You know, I could be sitting with my mates in the pub, like having a nice
Yeah.
time, but my brain is just not, my brain isn't in my body, you know, it's just somewhere else.
Yeah. And that's the like starting to grasp that. And I still, you know, I've had ups and downs through the whole of this lockdown. I mean, what are we on? We're like 9 months that we've gone through
Yeah,
this or
pretty much,
more
yeah.
maybe. You know, I had another dip recently with it, just trying to find that motivation.
Yeah.
And it was just before I started this mentorship course with a lady called Christina Force. She's a New Zealand lady, and a quick thing of what she does, ultimately she has an 8-week boot camp,
Yeah.
and its tagline is get paid to shoot what you love. So she used to work as an agent for photographer for 20 years for
Oh, cool.
large agencies around the world, and now lives in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And so you apply to do the course, she has a chat with you and you show her images and she goes, yeah, right, you're on. And there's like 16 of us around the world in all sorts of different areas from age 60 down to probably 25.
Yeah.
And we have these weekly calls and she's helping you rebuild your website and look at your work and help you find direction within your personal projects. So that's been brilliant. And again, it's all the same, like doing the work on my head, how I am, how I act, also helps me within my photography. If I'm not calm and relaxed and happy or at peace, then it's hard for me to tap into that creativity because I'm stressing. I'm thinking, oh God, is the client going to like this? Oh, you know,
Yeah.
when you're in that bit, you're in the flow, that kind of flow state.
Mm.
Kind of like when you're surfing, you know, when you surf a wave and everything just clicks in.
Yeah.
I mean, I like, and I'm terrible at this, I like a lot of stuff with surf, but when everything works and you're just cruising along, you're trimming along, you're thinking of absolutely nothing else apart from, this is pretty fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Or you know, whether it's, you know, surfing, like I said, you know, I do a lot of windsurfing as well and stuff. Even if you're thinking, oh, this is fun, but if you're not thinking about that, you're thinking about what you're doing. You're thinking, right, setting up my bottom turn, setting a rail, right now, you know, I need to kind of do this, and then you're like, right, no, and you know, it's having, and I mean, I'm, you know, a huge advocate for this, and people that listen to my podcast regularly must be bored of me saying this, but having something like that doesn't need to be, you know, like well, Dawn Days is a perfect example. Having something that you can consume, fill your time with for even just a couple of hours a week is like essential for, I think, for mental health, for your happiness, because you just,
Yeah, I think people get it from like people that draw that,
yeah,
and you can lose yourself in that. Whatever it is I think it's just about losing yourself
yeah,
in the creation of something.
yeah. Whether
It's brilliant.
yeah, whether it's, but when you say creation, like that's, but like even like just an experience as well, whether it's riding a wave, riding a bike down a hill, you know, playing around a golf, like whatever it is people do, you know, everyone's so different. But finding something like that, and you know, again, I say it all the time, but I think a lot of people go through life without having something like that.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate that I've had these sports. And also, you know, I was acutely aware that there was a lot of people around the world locked into big cities.
Yeah,
And I'm very lucky that I've got this beach that I could go down to. And I guess to go back into the Dawn Days thing, there was the visuals which were to relax people, but I ended up being really quite honest. Like, I've not even gone back and read any of it because
yeah,
it was just what I felt. Some of it was edited by friends or family, and some of it is just awesome dyslexic stream of consciousness.
yeah, yeah,
I say awesome, but the awesomeness of dyslexia, a big fan, which we can talk about later.
yeah,
But so I really kind of bared myself because I also have this thing with social media where most of it is just this glossy, like veneer of life that
yeah,
people put up, and
yeah,
we're all culprits of it. Like hell, I've done that loads.
yeah,
And then I thought, well, I just kind of want to actually put up exactly what's happening. I'm going to be totally honest. And I think that's the way I would like to go forward, way more with the likes of social media or
yeah.
whatever. You know, as a photographer, yeah, you need it? I don't think you do need it, but it's definitely advantageous.
Oh,
I
for
do
sure.
get jobs from it for sure. But learning for me personally, it's about learning to manage that relationship with it because it's designed, as we all know, to like suck us right in.
Mm.
And, you know, I love looking at pretty pictures of waves and whatever's going on. But ultimately, I don't need to spend that much time on it. I need to put my work up, be happy with that, and just leave it. And honestly, I'll tell you what I do. I post something, then I delete the app for a week.
Yeah,
And then I'll put it back on because I'm weak. I'll like wake up in the back of the van, feel a bit groggy, with a little swipe along, and you're like, wow, what did I just do?
yeah. How have I've just lost 2 or 3 hours. Yeah,
Yeah. And then, you know, there's irony within it, is that a lot of the content that I shoot when I'm working, doing my work, is used on there because marketing is no longer just print.
no,
Marketing is digital.
if anything, it's rarely print these days.
Yeah, yeah. It's such a beaut when you get something in print.
Oh,
And I just got a cookbook through the door from the publisher, and some friends of mine in the West Coast, the seafood shack in Ullapool, and my pal Josh is a fisherman. So
Yeah.
he's out fishing the prawns and the lobsters. They're coming in, some are going to market, and the rest are going to his partner Kirsty and
Yeah.
Fenella, and they're cooking it up. And I've just got these shots from this trip that I had with him, which was meant to just be hanging out with pals, thinking about a personal project. Now, they ended up with like 5 shots in their cookbook, which was great. And then the film I shot with Josh, the BBC Alba actually ended up buying it and making a TV ident.
Sick.
When it's one of those sort of things. So like going back to that personal stuff, that personal work, where I had no intention to sell that. I was going to make a little doco on them.
Yeah.
But then BBC Alba said, actually, we love this. We're going to make something out of this.
Yeah.
Like, oh, great. And in 3 years down the line, I sell some photos for their cookbook. But
Right.
yeah, sorry, that was a long roundabout way about saying it's just so great to get something like physically printed in your hands. It is awesome.
Yeah. But I think, like I said this in my last podcast, which incidentally isn't actually out at the time of recording this yet, but I've just done a podcast with Salema Masekela, who's a ESPN Red Bull commentator.
Yeah.
Yeah, Salema, a black guy from America, from California.
Yeah.
But I did a podcast with him, and we were talking about that a lot as well. And we were talking about how all of people's best work that they do in creative, this kind of thing, usually they're not doing it with an intention of trying to make money out of it or use it for commercial means. Usually they're doing it just because they love it. Whether it is you shooting something, Salema was talking about some of his he's been to South Africa making some documentaries. I think he does a lot of stuff with the kind of surf scene down there, and he's making these documentaries and stuff, and it wasn't with the intention of them being kind of put out there for lots of people to see and all this stuff. He's just doing it because it's something that he's passionate about. And often those things, because they come across as the most authentic, don't they? And that's what really resonates with people. If you're doing something, and that's like what you said with social media, it's life through rose-tinted goggles. So if you made that video about, your pal who's a fisherman, and you didn't necessarily care that much, you're kind of doing it with the intention of selling it to the BBC, people would smell that, wouldn't they?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that goes into that thing of whatever realm you're in, those personal projects that you do. Like I got into photography and film because I love documenting moments. I love taking portraits of people. That's my kind of thing. And I think all of those, but I lost that. I lost that for a couple of years. I didn't do that much of it.
Yeah.
And then I found it again, and that's it. I'm back on this train of like, yes, I want to create this. The other jobs pay to be able to shoot the personal projects.
Yeah.
Ultimately. Yeah. But when I'm working for a client, I love it. I get to do a bunch of stuff for a few whiskey brands in Scotland.
Awesome.
And that's great. It's not it's not public facing work, some of that, but the people are great. I really like the people I work for. I love whiskey. I love Scotland. What's not to love?
Win-win. So
yeah.
How was Dawn Days kind of you kind of established it, you put it all out there and stuff, and I guess it wasn't really necessarily intended for like the masses to see and things. I know you said it was for people to kind of watch and be able to sort of relax for a minute or so, but how was it received?
Yeah, you know what, it kept building more and more momentum, and people were sharing it about. I ended up doing a little interview with Roger Cox from The Scotsman, who's a good pal who had been keeping an eye on it.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it just kept building and building, actually. And Nick was down in St. Ives in Cornwall doing it. And then his pal Warby got into doing it. And this was one of the coolest stories of Dawn Days. Warby hadn't been in the sea for like 19 years.
Whoa.
He shoots stills on land. He's an awesome photographer, originally from London, lives down there. And he was inspired by Nick, donned his wetsuit, got in with the water housing, and he was just all in.
Yeah.
And it really, really helped him. He was in a bad place as well, like loads of his work.
Really?
So I was chatting with Nick maybe once a week. We would catch up, maybe twice a week, talk what we were doing. We'd send photos to each other, comment on stuff. And it just built this momentum, and people were starting to share these links all around the place. And I'd get random messages from people just saying, hey, I'm in New York and like just loving seeing the ocean. I've not been home in Scotland for ages. or pals in Australia, kind of like all over the shop. It was
Yeah.
really cool, and it gave me a drive, but not in a kind of like getting a boost from people liking stuff. It was like the fact that it was actually helping people,
Yeah.
and it could just be one person. Didn't matter.
Yeah.
And now I keep hearing stuff. Like I had a message this other day from a girl called Olivia, who said she was inspired to go and swim.
Yeah.
What I must say, little safety warning: this is not the time of year to go and work out how to go and swim. Now, if you've got a wetsuit, all good. But if you're going to go wild swimming, this is not the time of year to start. So
No.
please, if anyone's listening and is like, I'm going to jump into the sea in my bikini or my boxers, wait until summer and
Yeah.
work yourself through it. Find out, find a little club. There's so many groups locally,
Yeah.
all around Europe, all around the world,
Yeah.
and join them and get a bit of it, because you can really severely harm yourself if you go in at the wrong time of year and not prepared.
Dude,
So that little warning.
yeah, no, I mean, well, I'll tell my story if you'll indulge me. But I started windsurfing when I was 18, so 10, nearly 11 years ago. Traveled the whole world. Was sponsored for quite a while. Like I achieved, I consider myself a fairly experienced water user. And I got back from a surfing trip to Morocco at the beginning of kind of January, February 2019. And I got back, got home, and the next day, or a couple of days later, it was really windy. So I went out windsurfing, and I put my suit on, went out, crashed in the waves, whatever, crashed a jump, and a wave came over me and just went, all the water just went down my suit, and my body, it was literally like that. Someone turned the lights off. Like honestly, my whole body just went, and I was, your breathing starts to like. My
Yeah.
breathing went. It was terrifying, and luckily I was in the break, so it was like an onshore windy day, so it kind of washed me kind of into where I could stand up. I'm quite tall anyway, so I kind of managed to do that, and luckily, I kept getting hit by waves and just water flushing through my suit every wave. And then luckily my kit got round the right way, and I just about managed to get my arms up, and somehow I water started, so I got up onto my board, and sailed most of the way. My girlfriend was on the beach filming, and by this point she'd kind of run down to the waterline and obviously saw that I was in a bit of trouble. So she like waded in her trainers in January, up to like her shins, and she literally just pulled me out of the sea, and like kind of stood upwind of me and just like wrapped her arms around me, and we just had to wait until my breathing stopped.
Yeah, it's amazing how quick things can go wrong.
Oh my God,
it's unbelievable.
Yeah, and like I said, I can consider myself like experienced. I've been going in the sea, doing sports in the sea for at this point about 9 years, and I just got caught out. I don't know whether I just got back from Morocco and wasn't acclimatized, or maybe I think the temperature dropped considerably in the. I think the wind was a bit northerly that day, so that always makes it a lot colder. But yeah, it was really terrifying. It was quite a humbling experience for me.
Yeah, that's brutal, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think you've kind of just reminded me of another thing that was really interesting with Dawn Days. Was it towards the end where things started to be laxed off and more people could kind of be in groups, as it were, outside?
Yeah.
Another local filmmaker and a pal of mine, I had contacted him to say, "Oh, could you maybe come down and get a couple of drone shots on the last day? Like, it'd be kind of cool, just seal it all off." And he was texted back quite rudely saying, "Nah." I was like, "Huh?" And he was like, "We need to do more than just that, Mike." I was like, "All right, okay." And the next thing I know, John's then following me, kind of filming what I'm up to and what the whole process was. And so this was brilliant. I hadn't seen John much. We were working away loads. But what I didn't realize was that John wasn't really that strong a swimmer.
Right.
But we were getting him in. Like he started to come in, we'd do some filming, and then he'd come in with a wetsuit.
Yeah.
And it was like this light switch for him. He'd totally been into his mountain biking and walking.
Yeah.
That was his thing.
Then.
But water had never been his thing. And now he's like swimming, he's got his sup, his kayak, he loves it. Water has become a part of his life. So it's like one of those other little nugs where a friend came to help me film and we're doing a 5-minute piece about the kind of experience of doing Dawn Days.
Awesome.
Together, along with another pal, Tim. Barry's going to be doing the sound on it, and Rob. So yeah, it's going to be really cool to keep doing that. But that's become this crew of guys that we're all chatting together as well. So it's really interesting, and it's so cool to see people get a buzz from water.
Yeah.
To get that kind of click, you can't force people, especially here. It's flipping cold.
Yeah, that's the thing. I like. Yeah, it does. There is something to be said. I mean, I've done a couple of podcasts with a couple of people. I did one with a woman called Easkey Britton, who's she's an Irish.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I thought
she's awesome.
You might be familiar. I did a podcast with her. She's like a marine scientist as well as a big wave surfer. She's far too accomplished in my eyes, to be honest.
And all the mental health work that she's doing. A friend, Jenny, does some work with her. I think, have I ever met her? No, I was out filming in Ireland, maybe 2018 at Mullaghmore.
Yeah.
And she was out one of those days. And it just, she charges. She's brilliant. And what a brain on her. Like the breadth of what she does is pretty cool.
Oh, it was such an awesome conversation. But yeah, and she, what was really interesting chatting to her, because I've always kind of known that I really like going in the ocean. Like I said, I grew up in there, and so voted one of the best beaches in the UK. It's a beautiful beach, and I always grew up going in the sea and stuff. And then obviously, from when I was 18 until till last year, it was my career as well. I was teaching people sport in the ocean. But even my mum, who doesn't go in the sea at all, won't do it, but still she goes for a walk on Nairn Beach every day because she said that the sound of the waves makes her calm. She enjoys it. So it was cool chatting to Easkey about like actual kind of the science behind what that does, and all this the blue health movement at the moment. That's interesting that your mate came out, and now I think that's happened to a lot of people though. I spoke to people in the industry and said they've got they've got shops selling paddleboards and things, and now paddleboards are out of stock everywhere. People are taking to the water like never before, I think.
And I think what you've just highlighted there is really interesting. Is you don't have to go and do a sport. You don't have to go into the water. You can sit by a stream. You can walk along the beach. Like all of that. There's something just about being close to it. It's beautiful, and we're made up of it. Like, what are we? 80 to 85% water. So it's not surprising that it's kind of nice bobbing around in it or watching it. And I think, what was that book? Was it The Blue Mind? There's a great book. I'll try and remember to send you a link, but it talks about that. There's tons of science behind it.
Yeah. It's meant, and like I think one of the things for me, and like what I've done, did a podcast with a guy called Ed. Shout out Ed. And we said, cliches are cliches for a reason, because they're good. But like, there is something quite sort of humbling about the ocean because it is so much bigger than us. It doesn't care. Like I said, yeah, cool. I'm like, oh yeah, I consider myself experienced at going in the sea, but yeah, cool. Nah, actually, I'm gonna throw myself down your wetsuit and you're gonna get really cold and freak out. It literally, it doesn't care. Doesn't care what you are, what you do. Like it's, and there is something. I think you kind of sit there and look at that and you go, actually, maybe my problems aren't so bad, and I maybe that's me chatting shit, but I think there is something there. And I certainly chatted to East about this, and there, she was saying that a similar thing of how kind of humbling and just how it's hard to fathom how massive the ocean is.
Totally, like it really that is so true, and it does, like the number of times things, like we were saying, that quick snap, how things will change.
Yeah.
But that's what I love about I just love that about the ocean. I like being near it, I like hearing it, I like the smell of it. But the same with like lochs, in Scotland we've got these beautiful peaty lochs.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing, that color. And in a lot of places we get to surf in Scotland, you get a mix of that.
Yeah.
So you get this crazy mix of freshwater and saltwater, which, like, from a photography perspective can be a nightmare to deal with, because you've got this oily peaty stuff coming through and you've got this mix, but it's brilliant. I love it. Totally obsessed. I used to spend, when I was working in the event industry, I would work solidly through the summer, and then I would go over to the Alps and do a season.
Yeah.
And for the first few years I was just, chopping veg, whatever it was, but that was my thing. I was obsessed with it, and I'd go into the mountains and see the mountains and ski my ass off.
Yeah.
But they would get to this point, and you were like, in Switzerland was where I was staying. I get to this point, I was like, kind of need some water, but I didn't realize that's what that was
You were looking
for a
yeah.
long, long time. And then I had a couple accidents towards the end of the seasons that I were doing, and lost a few friends in other accidents. That kind of progressively happens in the mountains.
Yeah.
And I found myself unknowingly sort of shifting over to surf,
Yeah.
another water element, and it felt a lot safer.
Yeah.
If you get caught underwater, generally you pop up. With snow, generally you don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there was this kind of shift over to the water, but it took me a long time to get comfortable in the water because I had that fear from a couple of the incidences that I had had on
Yeah.
snow. There was a relationship, and I had to deal with that to sort of break through that. And now I find myself being really comfortable in bigger surf. But I also think being comfortable in bigger surf is because I've shot a lot in the water.
Yeah.
So when I'm bobbing around with the camera, it's a whole other perspective.
Mm.
And I think that really helped me with my confidence and my kind of wave knowledge.
Yeah.
I'm still a pretty kooky surfer. I surf really weird single fin hull boards, long boards, but I love it.
We're all kooks, aren't we? We're all kooks in our own way. That's what there's a good couple of good Instagrams, Kook Slams and Kook of the Day, and that's what they say, don't they? We're all kooks in our own way. Yeah. But
we all surf like Dave Rastovich or Devin Howard in our minds at time. You're like,
yeah,
look what I did.
When
you never really want to see the video.
No, never. Yeah, that's the thing. Just don't film me. Yeah, take a picture, like maybe now and then. But no, you're right. Like I think at the end of the day, time in the water is time in the water. Whether you're holding a camera, whether you're surfing, whether you're windsurfing, paddleboarding. But I think it is one of those things that needs to be respected without sounding like a Hawaiian lifeguard. But it does need to be respected, and I think it needs to be taken seriously. I know I've started taking it a bit more seriously. Before I always had the view of like, because I'm down here on the south coast and I'm like, oh, I'm a Scotsman, I'll stay in my 3-2 until I don't need it. And whereas now I'm a bit more like, all right, yeah, maybe I'll chuck my 5mm on and I'll wear a hood and all this, because I've had that experience.
Yeah. Oh, I'm lucky if I even ever take my boots off. My feet are destroyed from so many winters, and I just love being warm.
Yeah.
So I've always got a hood on. I think the thinnest wetsuit I'll have on is a 4mm, but it's always got a hood because it can be really windy up here.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to have done is I do not want to have my ears drilled.
No.
I really don't want that.
Where do you surf mainly up in Scotland?
Kind of all over, to be perfectly honest. Edinburgh is my local area, so we've got a few bits and bobs around there, and I'll head up to Thurso and do a bit of shooting and surfing up there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of obviously a pretty classic area.
Yeah, I'd like to get out there. I've never been.
It was funny. The first time I was ever there was pretty random. They had a WCT, like a world series up there called the Cold Water Classic.
Amazing.
At the time, I was doing event stuff, and pals of mine worked for Red Bull, so they supplied me, because that's what Red Bull did. They supplied infrastructure, so they supplied me and a generator to power the satellite uplink and the judges' tent. Yeah. And I had never really done much surfing until that point. And I'm sat in my car in this car park watching some of the world's best.
Yeah.
So not having a clue who any of them are. Yeah. And I think that got into my brain and was like, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
This is probably what I want to be able to surf when I get good.
Yeah.
So I did that for about 4 years. It was great. Tow a generator up from Inverness, plug a couple cables in, and sit back. And I've got a bunch of lifelong friends that still live up there, and others that were traveling with that kind of surf circus, as it were.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you know, I briefly in lockdown 1, I spoke to a guy called Mark Boyd, he's a local surfer up there.
Yeah. Boydie's lived there for years. Yeah, I know Boydie.
I was speaking to him about trying to get him on the podcast, but it just hasn't. I think he works offshore as well, so we've never lined it up. I need to get in contact with him again. Yeah, he's
a busy fella, that one, but yeah, keep chasing him.
Yeah, because Thurso gets pretty heavy. I mean, I don't know if Thurso East is the heavy one, isn't it?
Yeah. It can do, and I think again that's a place that people need to, as with all of these heavier waves, you need to learn to respect it, take your time, and learn how to surf stuff like that, because again, things can just go so wrong so quickly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, it's interesting. Yeah, no, I really want to. I want to spend more time kind of surfing around Scotland. They do the Tiree Wave Classic up in on Tiree, the windsurf competition every year. It's the world's longest running windsurf event.
Yeah, Andy Groom, isn't it? That used to run that.
Yeah, that name rings a bell.
Because
The
he
guy,
used to work on the Cold Water Classic. That's the yeah. They've done that for like 20 years or more.
yeah, 20, 30 years. It's mad how long that event's run for. But it's really cool. It's really cool.
Well,
So
one of our I think one of the most up and coming surfers that we've got in Scotland actually lives on Tiree. There's a family there, the Largs, that live there, and wee Ben, who last winter got towed into a 25-footer
yeah,
out in Moor, and Ben's all of 14 maybe at the moment. Currently going through a bit of an ankle injury,
yeah,
so that's a little shout out to him to get better and get back on it. But we've got some good young surfers.
yeah.
Also a kid, Finn McLaren, and Craig up in Thurso as well. It's brilliant to see all these guys like coming up.
Yeah, there's definitely. I don't know. Like we said at the beginning of the podcast, I think there is something happening in Scotland at the moment. You know, every time I go up to Nairn, there's more and more people out paddleboarding, kite surfing. You know, just going on the water. I think there is something happening. People are. I don't know whether it's lockdown and people have been furloughed and had nothing better to do with their time,
Mm.
or whether they've just realised what they've got on their doorstep.
And I think globally that's happening. When I speak to people all around the globe, I've got my sister lives in New Zealand. Obviously, they're in a completely different bubble to the rest of us.
Yeah,
Friends all over the shop, and actually, everyone's saying that people have got more time or have realized that they've not been spending time in the outdoors,
yeah,
and actually they really like it, and it's really good for them. And it's as simple as that. We can overcomplicate this whole conversation, but it is that simple thing of just going doing something for yourself.
yeah.
Turn your phone off, leave it in the car, or put it on airplane mode if you're out walking and you want to stay safe. Just like switch off and zone out and go and enjoy yourself. And that's what I need to keep telling myself, because I catch myself like coming back in that loop and be like all stressed, like, what you
Oh
doing?
yeah. Dude, I'm the worst for that. I'm very good. I can sit all day on the podcast or to my mates, everything, and dish out this advice and you need to stop doing this, boys, and you need blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to actually listening to my own advice, I'll be like, no, that's not for me.
Yeah, but that's the key, isn't it? That's
Yeah,
what for me is noticing that these things come up. Notice when you wake up and you've got that little funky mood, and
yeah,
realize that it's okay.
yeah.
Like it's okay to feel a bit funky sometimes.
Yeah. I
Like,
call it steering. I call it steering into the skid. I'm like, if I know it's happening, and I know, I mean, that's the first part of the process, and the first part of you not overcoming it, because you're never necessarily going to overcome it, but the first part of the process is being able to consciously know it's happening. You know, I can consciously wake up and go, right, I don't feel right, so I'm having a shit day. Like today I had some shit news earlier about work and all this, and I was really frustrated and stuff. And then for November, I've been going out for a run every day. I've been running 5K a day. And I went for my run today, and I came back and I was like, oh, I feel a bit better now. You know,
yeah,
feel a bit better. And then I sat down. I knew I had this podcast, so I was like, right. And then now I'm just going to sit and I'm going to chill out and switch my brain off for an hour or so before the podcast. So then when I sit down and chat to Mike, I've got a fresh brain, and it's worked. But I think everyone needs to find those processes that work for themselves.
yeah, because we're all beautifully unique, and
Yeah,
we've got all our own stuff. We've all got stuff. We've all got issues or whatever. We've got stuff,
yeah,
and it's just working out what works for you. And I think that's also something I started thinking about when I was doing the Dawn Days thing is, and I hope it didn't come over that way. I really don't know that I wasn't ranting at people about things. A lot of the time, I just felt like I was telling my story, and if some small part of it resonated with people, then great. And if it
yeah,
didn't, it didn't.
yeah,
But I also felt like, again, one of maybe those cliches, but male mental health, like more and more men are talking out about it, and
yeah,
that's great. And I felt like if I'm going to do stuff online, then it has to have a bit more soul to it.
mm,
Like it has to have a purpose.
yeah,
And it doesn't have to reach millions of people. It just has to reach one or two. That's all that really matters.
yeah,
And even that aside, I felt good doing it. I felt good creating these little nugs of yeah, with people. And then Barry's music. So I can take credit for the visuals, but so much of that work would not have been possible without Barry, like
Yeah.
100%. And I had luck with loads of other musicians like Julie Fowlis let me use a track, my pal Colin McLeod, my friend David Jacks, the boys at Iglamat, the guys at Mammal, my friend Nick. They all let me use stuff, but then Barry was just this constant. And he would message me like, I'm buckled, you're not getting anything today. You know, he would just be honest, he's like exhausted. But that reminds me, one of the most beautiful moments was my pal Nick messaged me with this album. And he was like, oh, look, we recorded this album down at Coldingham Bay in our friend Derm's hut.
Yeah.
It would really mean so much to me if you could use this for the project, but don't worry if it doesn't work. And it was just like the perfect morning that he sent it to me. And I went down and like the way the light was, the little seal that was bobbing up and down, everything just kind of linked in. And it was just so cool because people were throwing me these things.
Yeah.
Because there was a little point where like before Barry really got stuck in, like, wow, what am I going to do for music?
Yeah.
But it would have taken the course it would have taken. But that really, really helped me. I can't thank Barry enough.
Yeah. No, definitely it is one of those things, like, you know, like you said at the beginning there, like with, you know, whether you help one person, two people, or 1,000 people, you know, it doesn't matter. Like I kind of have the same thing with this podcast. You know, I kind of started it and I still to this day question, I'm like, am I just talking to other people as a form of like self therapy? You know, is it this, or, you know, and it's been, you know, it's been brilliant. I do get a lot of messages, you know, I'm saying, you know, not necessarily, oh, you've helped me, but just how much they're enjoying it and things like that. And that's, you know, that's all I, you know, all I wanted, or all I want really. But yeah, I do have these kind of moments where I'm like, oh, am I just doing this so that I can, it's funny where your brain goes when you, as soon as you, when you do something and it starts to like even a little bit do well. I'm sure you've had it, you know, with Dawn Days, you automatically almost second guess yourself a little bit, don't you? And you're like, am I doing this for the right reasons? And
yeah, I think for me that came because I was so in it towards the end, or like after the end,
yeah,
where I kind of just had this, woke up one day and was like, oh my God, what the hell did I just do? And
yeah,
I was about to go and read through stuff. I'm like, it's done,
yeah,
whatever. You know, just those doubts. And that's that internal critic, isn't it? That wee devil on your shoulder who's like, no, you shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have done this.
yeah,
You know, that internal critic. And ultimately for me, it was just like all those issues or any of that stuff is just me giving myself shit.
yeah,
You know, stop giving myself a hard time. You know, oh, society says I should do this. Family say you should do that. They say you should do this. You're like, well, you actually strip it down, or for me, you strip it down and go, that's all stories in my head.
yeah,
You know, if I stop with those, yeah. So it's being aware, like you say, just building an awareness and having fun with it.
yeah,
Like not being overly serious. I could definitely be a culprit of that. And I think at one point in Dawn Days, if I look back, I probably did get quite serious.
yeah,
And then the next day, it was a video of me and my feet and these really bizarre long toes that it looks like I've got because of these wee booties I've got,
yeah,
you know, and just had a bit of a laugh and then, you know, lightened the mood.
Hmm.
Because that's what I felt like that day. I was just like, I felt kind of frivolous. You know,
Yeah.
it's 3:30 a.m. Absolutely nobody's up. The only people I would see every morning is this cop car driving across Portobello Prom. And after halfway through May, I thought I'd better go in and say hello because they're probably wondering what's up.
Yeah.
You know, there was that internal guilt that we all felt if you did anything that you thought someone might not think is
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah,
And I wasn't going out far. Literally, like I would go up to my chest, really,
yeah,
no deeper. So I went and chatted to them and I told them, and they're like, ah, we have been wondering. There has been a bit of chat about you.
yeah,
Glad to know. And I'm like, I can swim, I'm warm,
yeah,
I live locally. I either walk down here or I ride my bike. And they were like, cool, you know, no
yeah.
worries.
We don't need to come in and get you.
Yeah. Because I think, yeah, there was this thing, I had this guilt in my head for a few days.
Oh, I think everyone had it where it's around that time, didn't they? I know I certainly did. Of like, you know, am I going out for my second outing today? Should I be doing it?
Yeah. Yeah. What a bizarre experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like you made the most of it. So why you kind of mentioned that you sort of stopped it and stuff. Did you make a conscious decision of like, right, lockdown's kind of over now. This is kind of done. Let's kind of put a bow in it there and have it as a thing rather than sort of continuing it and kind of feeling like you're almost milking it.
Yeah, so ultimately it was Dawn Days of May was the kind of name that it ended up
Right.
having with Nick, but it was just to do it for that month,
Yeah.
because to do that, I was getting up, like I said, towards the end, about 2:30 in the morning, going out filming, coming back, like having a bit of a morning, starting to edit, do the photos. And then 3 days a week for part of May, I was also working at my friend's coffee roastery
Yeah.
to help him out. He called me and he was like, look, I used to do I do their photography.
No.
And Steve at Machina was like, look, can you just come in and help?
Yeah.
Because everyone, I'm like, yep, no problem. So I was exhausted by the end of May.
Yeah.
Like I was wiped out. And that was a little bit the irony in that was that I've spent all this time being away, running about all over the place. And then I kind of did that to myself through Dawn Days of May towards the end.
Yeah.
But it was good. I went, cool, time to chill out. And I just had a couple weeks to chill out. And we're still doing more stuff. Me and Nick actually talked today, and we're looking at what the evolution of it is to
Yeah.
keep that going, but not on a daily basis. It's
No.
just too intense.
Yeah. You know.
But and not even cherry picking the days, like going with when it feels good. So you've not seen the last of Dawn Days. We'll be back, and hopefully with more people. But my vision, if I was to give you my little like blue sky vision,
Yeah.
what I would love is that I would love more people to get involved with it around the world.
Yeah.
I would love to open that conversation up. I'd love to see this map with like little flashing lights of people that have gone and done a dawn and they've put up a photo, or they've gone and stood on the top of a hill
Yeah.
and caught the dawn. Like you don't have to get in the water. You could
No,
literally pull
yeah.
out your bed and like lean out the window. But whatever people are doing, I would love that to build, and I would love to create some little community around it. Exactly what that is, I don't know, and I don't want to think about it too much. I
No.
just want to work out how to facilitate that and get other people doing it. And I think the bit that I almost reminding myself of is it'd be great to empower one young girl or guy to be able to do that, to give them the equipment. If they're into water,
Yeah.
give them the equipment, and then not so much a mentorship program, but like myself to give a call, or Nick, about settings or whatever's going on, or if they're having a bit of a funky day. I'm not a counselor, and I don't profess to be at all, but to connect with someone, but to empower them and give them the ability to go out and shoot.
Yeah.
I don't again know how I'm going to do that, but at some point that would be kind of cool, because there was one person in my life at school. I'm very dyslexic, and the school I went to were really good, but there were still teachers that ultimately didn't believe in it.
Yeah.
But there was one teacher, Dave, and Dave was amazing. He was a computing teacher, and weirdly, that's what I got my C in
Yeah.
computing. Don't know how. Basically, Dave, and he waved a carrot at me. He said, "I'll teach you how to lead climb outside if you pull your finger out and knuckle down. You
Yeah.
don't, you're not getting taught." And he believed in me. He's like, "I believe in you. I know you can do this." But
Yeah.
he gave me that carrot. And that was a great thing. So I guess that thing of wanting to help a bit within the dyslexic realm, but just in general, like if you can take 5-10 minutes out of your week, an hour out of your month, whatever it is, it's such a small amount, and it could mean so much to someone.
Yeah. And it's self-gratifying as well, isn't it? It's lovely. It's lovely to feel like you can pass on some knowledge to someone else. Like it makes you, it's great for them, but it's a two-way relationship. It makes you feel great
Yeah.
as well. I mean, I know, from my years sort of teaching windsurfing, and when I've, younger instructors that, they'd shadow me for a week while I was teaching and things like that. And I felt great being like, oh, when they do this wrong, tell them this and things like that.
Yeah.
Passing the baton, so to speak. Like it's a lovely thing to do, no matter what field you're in.
Yeah, totally. And I think working within photography and film, I think it's a lot more open than it used to be with a lot of things.
Yeah,
But people can be very guarded
for
with
sure.
things like they're like secrets. But actually, like I always bang on, my mates are probably so sick of this saying, but life's not a competition, it's a collaboration.
Yeah,
And the sooner you start collaborating with folk, doing stuff with people, it's just a better result. You can't do everything, and it's way more fun to do it with other people.
Yeah, it gets.
That's what I think.
No, I agree, I completely agree. And like, if you view life as a competition, you're going to be pretty exhausted all the time.
Yeah,
because it
totally.
because it's not a way to live life. Going through, whether it's financial, trying to look like you've got more money than everyone else, or anything.
Yeah.
You end up not being truly yourself, do you? You end
Yeah.
up, no matter what it is, you put up a wall, whether it's, I'm not going to tell you my settings on my camera, or this is the car I drive, or anything like that. It's an exhausting way to live.
Yeah, and not to take anything away from competitive sport, because that's
No,
amazing. All that. But I'm not to say I'm not a competitive person, that's not totally true. We all have an element of competitiveness in us, but it's really not something that drives me in that sense. And when I find myself in that competitive mindset, it's pretty negative for me. It's pretty toxic.
Yeah.
And I'm way better with more like, oh, I really want to work with her and him on this. Can we get together and do this? I'm crap at that. You're awesome at that. Help.
Yeah, exactly. I think the competitive, athletes competing and stuff, that's a whole different kettle of fish, isn't it? A whole different thing, because they're, they're making a career out of it, and you can't shit on anyone for trying to make a career out of something, but also they're trying to achieve greatness in whatever they've chosen. I fully, as a, you're a surfer as well. Like, I don't know if you've seen, John Florence, there's a new documentary on Amazon about him, and his kind of run up to the Olympics and stuff. And it's amazing what these, what guys at the top of, or even in the middle of any sort of sport competition, what they put themselves through, is insane to try and achieve,
it's absolutely mind bending. It's like, hey, I need to watch that, but you can watch those things and be like, oh boy, I'm a bit lazy. Or like, or it's interesting to see, someone like John, you could look at just thinking of raw natural talent and just surfing a lot, but I'm sure there's so much more behind that.
Oh, his one's amazing. And actually, one of the best things is the way it started. And the way it started was him saying, you spend your whole life building up to win a world title, and when you get the world title, you expect everything to change, and then you wake up the next morning and everything's exactly the same.
Yeah.
And it took that kind of tone, but it's definitely worth a watch if you've got an hour.
Definitely, I'll check that. But that's that thing, isn't it? Like, I can have that at the end of a big project or whatever. Is that there's that kind of bit afterwards where you're building to this thing.
Yeah.
But actually, it was all about getting there. Once you're there, it's like, oh,
yeah.
What now?
Well, yeah.
As opposed to learning to sit and go, that was good. Reflect back on it, but it can be quite underwhelming. I think people find that, don't they? When they get their world title, whatever, they're just sat there waking up with a hangover, going, "Oof."
Yeah.
All right then. What next?
Well, exactly. To quote the American Office, I think it's Andy Bernard, the Nard dog, but he says something like, "You never realize you're in the good old days until they're the good old days."
Yeah.
It's weird that it's something, from a comedy show, but I found it really poignant, and it's so true. You're always sitting telling funny old stories from something in the past, and you just keep doing that throughout your life, and you never actually sit there and go, we're having a good time right now. Whether it is you're on a video shoot, or Dawn days, getting in the water and stuff. Now we're sitting talking about it. It's a really funny way that we choose to live.
Definitely.
Yeah. So quickly, before we finish up, I wanted to talk a little bit. You mentioned it a couple of times about your sort of your dyslexia, being dyslexic, and kind of how that's informed your life. Before we hit record, I said I've got a few friends, my girlfriend, my brother, who are all very very dyslexic. So I mean, what's your experience with it been like?
My experience with it, I was really lucky in a sense, because my mum and dad, especially my mum, just kind of thought something's up here.
Right.
Like, he's switched on, but something's up. And so from a very young age, she had an inkling. My mum's never been tested, but we're pretty sure she's dyslexic as well.
Right.
So the first part of my life at school was horrendous. My mum would literally have to tear me, she says, and I don't remember any of this. She would literally almost have to tear me out the car within reason. I just didn't want to go.
Mm.
I just wanted to stay with her. And so for those first 4 years, it was pretty traumatic probably for my whole family. But again, I have absolutely no memory of it because my brain's just gone out. So then I moved school, started getting help with it, but just struggled all the way through school. I just wasn't an academic person. I loved sport. I think at school I just wanted to go and drive trucks or something ridiculous,
Yeah.
when I was about 14.
Yeah.
But I think there was a pivotal moment with Dave when he believed in me. And then I can't remember who said it to me. And they just said, look, Mike, don't think of, at the time it was like dyslexia was a learning disability,
Yeah.
which when you look back, like that is the dumbest bunch of words to put together. Like
Yeah.
it's not a disability.
No.
And when someone turned around to me and went, look, think of your dyslexia as a gift. Think of it as a different way of thinking and think of it as your brain just being wired differently. And that's cool.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Go with it. And that really, that stuck with me forever. It wasn't like in my head, I maybe had this thing where I was like, I've got a little superpower.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was better than anyone else, but I had this little special thing
Yeah.
that wasn't a disability. It was a gift.
Yeah.
And I've got this gift. I can go with this. And I had a really supportive family. I was very lucky with that and I got a lot of help with it. But it's been a struggle all the way through. But learning to ask people for help, building up a bunch of people that I can email and say, hey, can you quickly look over this
Yeah.
before I send it to the managing director of whoever else, so they don't think that there's a 12-year-old trying to do a photo shoot for them, you know? Like, it's not that bad. It can be corrected. And actually, a lot of people quite like my dyslexic messages. My dad's kept all my notes and a bunch of emails of all these funny things that I would say.
Yeah.
And then some people will screen grab me. And I think on my Instagram profile at one point it said, what was it? It was like surfing waves, snow. And I thought it said talking smack, but it said taking smack. And my sister was like, I've just noticed this. I think you might need to change it.
Yeah.
Hilarious. So yeah, dyslexia has probably formed almost everything that I've done. The way that I do things can be really roundabout,
Yeah.
but that's the way I do it, you know? And I think I've got a creative element to me with it, but there are people that are physicists, politicians, bankers, businessmen and women, you know, like it doesn't mean that you're just creative. It doesn't mean you can't spell and write. It's so much more than that. And I don't think we'll probably ever know completely. And that's fine.
Do you think it's one of those things as well that's, you know, a bit like mental health, like dyslexia? Do you think it kind of varies from person to person? Like, do you think there's a bit of a spectrum for dyslexia as well? Because obviously,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, that must make it difficult to kind of put a label on as well, you know?
And for teachers and everything, teachers have, you know, such respect for what they do. And it's so hard to know because there's so many different parts. There's like the reading and writing. There's, you know, I used to look at a blackboard and then it would go into my brain, essentially flip it around and it'd be back to front when I wrote it down. I have a bit of auditory dyslexia. I have numerical dyslexia.
Yeah.
But I'm not as dyslexic as some of the other dyslexic people I've met, but
Yeah.
I thought I was like brutally dyslexic. So it's such a wide gambit, or if that's the right word, the sliding scale, it's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
The most important thing, if there's anyone listening that is dyslexic or has a dyslexic kid and they're struggling, like they just need love and they need to be told that they're not stupid. You know, they've got a gift and they think differently. I don't quite know. It doesn't always work for everyone, but it's, you know, it's all good. You can achieve it, whatever you want to achieve. Some points you might have to knuckle down and work a lot harder. And some points you'll just find that awesome dyslexic brain kicks in and you kick ass at whatever you're doing.
Yeah. Like you said, I mean, it's such a nice way to put it. And it's,